There we go.
Hi, Fern.
All right.
Oh, we're here.
We're here.
She'll turn it off.
I was not allowed on for whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Why isn't it on?
Well, it was my fault. I had clicked in the February meeting by accident. So it was saying there's another meeting in progress.
Okay, well, we forgive you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. We are good. Let's see what time, and we have another minute. I've just had a plethora, if there is such a word, of people saying, oh my God, I have now a conflict. I'm going to take the recording. I'm going to take the recording. So we'll see.
Yes.
And I had one person who said they weren't going to be there here that are now with us. But I'm happy to be with you. Where am I? Okay, there I am. I'm at the top. Okay, hi, Cheryl. Okay, I have to find
I'm going
me.
to make you host, Cheryl.
Okay, and we're recording?
Yes.
Okay, I have to already watch my words.
Okay.
Great. Oh, and I see some beautiful faces, and I welcome my friends from quite a few different locations. And we have Anna with us, at least at the bottom of my screen, who's not with me, but in the same city as I am. I'm right now in Austin, Texas. And with the miracles of technology, I'm talking to you in many different places, including off continent in Israel. Two of you, welcome. And I just sent my husband downstairs to the business center because he's here for a hearing in Austin, but he's on Zoom to City Council in El Paso, so I can't begin to tell you how diverse we are geographically at the moment. Everybody's looking good, and I'm going to begin because I like to be respectful of the folks who are on a schedule or who have joined on time, although you're all welcome at any time. At the end of the last class, Rochelle asked, why hadn't we ever heard about this George Washington thing? And there was just too much to deal with at that particular moment. And I always say there's a lot more to talk about. Maybe we'll have time. So I'm going to dedicate 5 minutes today to that particular topic because maybe you thought it was a side comment. It's actually a pretty important comment. And it's not, it's a little bit of a not good news kind of comment, but I promise you that most of today is going to be about pretty good, positive stuff. At least I hope it is that way. From my perspective, it is. So the question was, I shared a Hanukkah / George Washington story with you, something pretty critical in American history and also something that relates to a medal that is still in existence that Washington gave to a Jew who taught him about the meaning of Hanukkah. It wasn't in textbooks for sure, no surprise. It wasn't in movies, it wasn't in our consciousness, even in Jewish context. But there's so much more to talk about now is examples. And of course, I just have to select a very few for you right now. But yesterday was MLK Day. So my mind went to the movie Selma. Well, obviously it went to MLK. And then of course it went to Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. They were truly friends, not just appearing on the same stage once or twice, but they were, I guess, collaborators in planning in issues like of the time, issues like Vietnam and religious liberties and workers' rights and racial equity. And they visited each other's places of worship. They were in constant communication. They were friends. They were colleagues as well. In, I think, 2015 or 16, I have it written here, 2014, something happened that I just want to talk about, and that is that the movie Selma came out. Now, probably all of us have some iconic photo of the Selma March with a line of 4 gentlemen, one of them being Dr. King and one of them being this bushy-haired guy in a beret who was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. That photo is kind of iconic in our brains, or at least it should be. For years, we've seen that photo of these men walking side by side. But unfortunately, in the original Selma footage, walking side by side didn't make it to the movie, not even an actor. No reference to Rabbi Heschel appears in anywhere in the movie. And the omission has had a lot of the Jewish community upset about that, and they were wondering why not, given how close they had been. Just that particular, I just wanted to point that out to you. More recently, just last year, the Hollywood Museum of Motion Pictures opened. And if you're going to have a museum in Los Angeles that celebrates arguably one of the most significant art form of the last century, how is it possible not to acknowledge the Jewish men who started it? Like, as this question was asked directly by a grandson of Samuel Goldwyn, and he ticked off names like his grandfathers and like Universal Studios, Mr. Lamy and Harry Cohn and the Zucker and the brothers Warner. They were all Jewish. So where are the Jews in this whole museum? There was a complaint, and particularly because the biggest single funder of the museum was a guy named Chaim Saban, and he donated 50 million to the museum. And he's gone very public in his view about even complaining to the ADL about the total void of any Jewish references in the museum. They have tried and they have done some things to make amends of late, but it's kind of interesting, kind of strange that those omissions were there, and we have to ask why. I got in my inbox probably 10 days ago a notice, and some of you may have as well, from the ADL, report on anti-Semitic attitudes now, currently, and it's pretty sobering. There was a study released just last month in December, and these are words from the ADL. We found that the number of people in the US who harbor extensive prejudice against Jews has doubled since 2019. Our most recent audit of anti-Semitic incidents showed surging levels. These findings about anti-Semitic attitudes should be a wake-up call. From Charlottesville to Pittsburgh to Poway to Colleyville, together, and there's a pretty much near daily harassment of Jews. We've learned that anti-Semitic beliefs can often lead to violence. Are they covered? Rarely, very rarely. The survey asked 4,000 US adults about anti-Jewish tropes and found that 20% of the respondents, which represents, using an algorithm, about 52 million people in the United States, about 20% agreed with 6 or more of the 11 anti-Jewish statements that we asked them about. Wow. Okay. One more thing, and that is that I was directed by my husband to a book called Jews Don't Count. It's actually a summary of a movie. This is out of the UK. It's not widely known here, but it's written by a comedian. His name is David Badiel, and he's a very visible Jew. And his thesis is that many people who consider themselves on the right side of justice, in other words, being socially liberal, harbor a casual racism towards Jews and feel that they're not deserving of sympathy or attention. That seems to be kind of what I'm noticing. We've certainly noticed that in NCJW in terms of not getting recognition of our issues while we are very passionately addressing the concerns of other groups. And I have to say one other thing, and then we're going to leave all of this bad news for today. I don't want you to leave it because my messaging is actually to tell you not to leave it. But one other point, and then we'll go on to the core of today's class. And that is that this idea of Jews not deserving of sympathy or of attention, I believe is felt, and I have for a long time, even among Jews. We have been still and we have been silent, and to a degree, we've been enablers. To a degree, we've been deniers. We haven't wanted to call attention. We've been silent ourselves. So what's the answer to the question about why didn't we know about George Washington? Because for many, many years, Jews then and now usually don't count. Close that curtain. Okay, guys. Many of us have heard people say things about, I can't believe in Jewish stuff. I can't believe in the earth, the world being created in 7 days, 6 days actually. I can't believe in a God up in the sky making lists of what we do well and what we don't do well. I can't believe in Noah and the ark and all these kinds of things. Well, these are things that as Jewish adults, we should not be believing on the very superficial level. A lot of folks are stuck in eight-year-old Judaism. And today my goal is essentially to give you a graduate course in Judaism, a much more profound look at some of the core ideas. And as always, I'm going to do the impossible, which is to teach in about 50 minutes a 3 or 4 year course, okay? Of course not. I guess where I'm going with this is that I'm going to give you some big ideas because that's how I've titled this. And I'm going to try to be clear, but I hope that you feel free. I encourage you. I would love for this to go on for anybody who is confused or if I say something that is troubling to them. A lot of this is really at a level that most folks have never thought about before. In all candor, some of us who feel we really know a lot about Judaism need to be lifelong learners, ongoing learners. The bar mitzvah or the bat mitzvah, okay, by the way, parenthetically, I will take a mazel tov from all of you now for my grandson Noah last week. Can I hear it?
Yes.
His bar mitzvah? Okay, we're done. Okay, moving along. The bar and the bat mitzvah are not terminal degrees, guys. They're just the very, very beginning. So today we're going to move forward and we're going to take a leap into college, at the very least, graduate school ideas, perhaps also. But it doesn't have to be, and it really shouldn't be, in the school lexicon. It's really in the life lexicon of a Jew, lifelong learners. I don't know if Leslie is on this today, but Leslie asked a question last week that I also shushed her, and I didn't shush her, but I put her off and I said, we'll get to it. Well, guess what? We're getting to it today. And that is, she had talked to a Christian friend who kind of was surprised that she was interested in learning Jewish stuff because the Christian friend was not very interested in learning more Christian stuff. So I think it's really important to start with that as a baseline. And for some of you, this may be a review, but you know what? Reviews are good. We see things in a different light, or we remember things that perhaps we have forgotten. So forgive me. But what we have to understand from the onset is that there's vast, vast and surprising differences in so many areas of what it is to be a Christian from what it is to be a Jew. Profoundly, at the end, we are all human beings. That's very important. And I'm going to toss in all of the other religions as well, without, of course, listing them. But for our point of view, since we live in a culture that is predominantly Christian, and we've grown up in communities where that jargon is prevalent, I think that there's a natural tendency to sort of grab on to those things as being that's what religious people think. So let's start first with Jesus. That's the appropriate thing in a Torah class. I have no problem with that. So the concept of Messiah, from a Jewish point of view, absolutely exists. But just like, I remember the Hampton Inn and there are kids screaming in the hall. Hopefully you don't hear. The concept of Messiah absolutely exists, but it's a very different Messiah. This is not today going to be more than just a taste of a couple sentences, but please understand that our Messiah is going to be of human origin. Traditionally a descendant of King David. And one where what we're going to do is have a better world. In other words, we would say an iconic leader who fixes everything or helps us as a team, as individuals, fix everything, not magically make everything good. So this idea of when there were debates and disputations in the 13th and 14th century in Spain, and they like to use this as sort of the public event to get people out on a Saturday night or whatever, which was to arrest a rabbi and have him prove that Jesus was wrong and Judaism is right. Most famous one being the Ramban, not the Rambam, Ramban in Barcelona. His argument, which he won that particular debate, they got him later, but he won that debate, was essentially there was no peace on earth, there was no beauty, the lion did not lay down with the lamb, all of these things. This is our Messiah is going to be a person who we, together with us, creates a better, complete world on this earth. We are not focused on the next one as much. More on that later. But I do want to say there is Messiah. Now, frequently in modern times, the thought is not so much as an individual, but as messianic times, meaning a time when the world is going to be whole. We pray for shalom, and the word shalom literally means complete or whole, not broken, not peace. It certainly means peace as a secondary definition, but to have peace, you need a complete, unbroken world. And that's at messianic times or something brought by our Messiah or Moshiach. I'm going to say about this something that applies to every other topic that I'm going to be mentioning today, and that is that there are definitely within communities particular beliefs and theories that that community holds to. But I can also tell you definitively, more on this later, that there is not one fixed belief about Messiah in every detail. In the generic term, there is a strong Jewish belief of a Messiah, someone who will help us get to a better world. Help make this a better world. Poor choices of words. The next thing I have to talk about is Christians believe that in original sin, and we are born, all humans, as sinners. That's inherent to us. And many of you have heard me say this before. Judaism absolutely does not feel that way. The word sin in Judaism is not the word sin in any way in terms of all of the emotional loading that there is in Christianity. The word sin, the most common word for sin is chet, which is the word that you use when you miss the target when you're shooting bows and arrows. In other words, you steered off course. You missed it. You didn't hit it exactly. That's a long way from burning in hell, a very long way. When you miss a target, what you do is you shoot again. And that's the belief, and that's our concept of tshuva. So the whole idea of sin is very, very different. Sin in Judaism is a human condition. Not being perfect is expected. We are not perfect, and we don't have to strive to be perfect. We have to strive to be human and to make a difference. But having said that, the other part of this particular thing is that we don't have to worry about sin in the future world as much also. Relatively speaking, it's way down on the list. Okay. Vices, the things that are sins that we're supposed to be away from. In Christianity, there are things that are inherently bad. And of course, there are different within Christianity. I'm using this mechanism of very much broadly generalizing, but you'll find that it is true. There's nothing that I'm making up. Of course, there are individual exceptions as well, and there are some churches with a little bit more latitude. But the vices are generally seen as things that are bad, like sex, like alcohol, like wealth, all of those things. In Judaism, all of these things are gifts with potential. How they are used and the context matters. In other words, there's nothing wrong with raising a glass and saying l'chaim. You don't have to be an angel. You're not more idyllic. You're not more perfect if you never have a glass of liquor. That's just not Judaism. Can you overindulge and become a drunk on the street? Yes. Or an abusive person? Yes. So the potential is there for good and the potential is there for bad. But it is not defined as sin or evil for the beginning, just on the onset. Okay. Another thing about Christianity. So let me just to recap. So one of the things is the Messiah idea. One of the things is our view of sin. Another one is why we're here, our purpose on earth. It's very easy to summarize contrast the purpose on earth between Christians and Jews. The Christian purpose on earth is to earn a place in the kingdom of God. So it's very focused on life after death. And Christianity, in many of its sects, more fundamentalist, says that you have to be attached to Jesus in order to do that. He's the only bridge towards heaven. No matter how good you are, you're not good enough because of original sin. In Judaism, there is belief in a very diverse belief on the afterlife, but there's not a focus on the afterlife. There's absolutely a focus on the here and now. And our purpose on earth is to be partners in creation. You've heard this a million times. You've heard the term tikkun olam. I'm going to suggest an alternative term to you in a sec, but fixing the world. Our purpose is based on now, on here. I'm going to read you, this is a very brief thing, but the job description that I like, it's from the book that I referenced 1 or 2 classes ago by Sarah Hurwitz, who is a former speechwriter of Michelle Obama. It's called Here All Along. But in this particular paragraph that I'm reading you, it's not only her words, she's quoting someone else whose name you'll probably recognize. Several someone's else. Okay. When asked to capture the essence of Judaism, Hillel, who was one of the greatest Jewish sages, replied simply, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to another. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go study." Another sage, the renowned Rabbi Akiva, declared that the key principle of the Torah is love your neighbor as yourself. Transcend the narrow straits of self, Hillel and Akiva seem to be imploring us. Turn your gaze outward and notice the plight of others. Resist the convenience of the "that's not my problem" callousness you may have developed in the face of the suffering around you. Rabbi Daniel Hartman refers to this core Jewish ethic of self-transcendence as the ethic of non-indifference, which he defines as the obligation to see the needs of others and to implicate oneself as part of the solution. That's a heck of a job description. It's very consistent with NCJW. It's very consistent with many philanthropic, many NGO type organizations. But within ourselves, that's why we're on earth. That's why we're here. And the rest, if we do, we can feel secure probably in saying that the next step will be positive. But our focus is not on getting there. Our focus is on doing here. So I love that term. We have an ethic of non-indifference. It's a big job description. It's never ending. Another difference, so we have job description, we have Messiah, and we have sin. Another one, and then I'll move on from Christianity, is the difference in the importance of clergy. Clergy in Christianity is generally especially appointed with special connection, let's say, a link to heaven. In Judaism, rabbi is an academic distinction, does not designate necessarily a holier person with a direct link to God. This may shock you, but a rabbi is not needed for ritual or for a life cycle, unless, of course, there are state governmental regulations to have a clergy person, but from a Jewish point of view, and a rabbi is certainly not needed to conduct services. This is in no way me trying to minimize a rabbi. That's not it, because an extreme value in Judaism is Talmud Torah, the studying of Torah. Study for all of us. I started this little talk with the importance of learning, and this is sort of the epitome degree. It's the PhD. And the idea that rabbis have pulpits is kind of a modern thing. The truth is that rabbis were scholars, often specializing in certain fields, certain areas, and having a a synagogue or not was not, could be, but not necessarily. So it was a different kind of thing. It was an academic title. And when many avenues were closed to Jews throughout the thousands of years, this was the one for the most intellectually elite, the most driven, and the most valued title you can have within the Jewish community. So that's another difference. Okay. The second one I'm going to tackle, moving ahead from Christianity, and then we'll stop for some questions because I probably have not confused you enough yet, is a tough one. And on the surface, I think it's going to sound confusing. I'm going to do my best. I've been telling myself, how am I going to make sense to you guys and to me about this? But Christians, at least in the stereotypical TV show or in Sunday morning church services on TV, quote scripture. You quote scripture and that's it. That line is it. There's a word for that in Judaism, and that's called pshat, the literal. And if you only read the literal pshat meaning of any verse from the Bible, you are pretty much frozen in that verse. What it means literally is what it means forever. That is in Christianity a core principle. It is written, and that's what it means. Judaism does not stop at the pshat. Pshat is the first step. It's an idea that has to be wrestled with, has to be thought about, has to be sort of nurtured in your head, maybe for an hour, maybe for your whole life. There's different levels. I've mentioned in other classes. I'm going to jump to the third one, but the acronym are the consonants in the word paradise, or pardes in Hebrew, which is pshat is the P one, the literal one. And the one that most interests us here today is the D one, which is the teach. What do we get from that? What is the message to us? How does it apply in our lives personally and in the greater world today in the year 2023? Aha. Now, how could something that was constructed thousands of years ago matter in the year 2023? Well, that's the beauty of Judaism. We are not literal, and there's a mechanism that's built in to keep interpreting, ongoing interpreting through the ages, through the eyes and the realities and the social constructs of any given time in history, what that particular thing means. Knowledge changes. Society changes. Now we are dealing with things like, well, now it's actually old news, 20 years ago. We had to decide, what does Torah say? And I mean, when I say Torah, I'm saying all the rabbinic interpretations after the written text. What does Torah say about when you say Kiddush on the moon, and it's when you're in space, in a spaceship, or at the International Space Station? You wouldn't realize it, but they found a basis for it in the 5 books, okay? You wouldn't think about stem cells being in Torah. Stem cells are discussed very much in Torah. And not to the Christian perspective, absolutely polar opposite determination of the value of that. The role of women is certainly evolving. And all of these things are a blessing of the fact that Torah in its interpretation level, we talk about oral Torah. And yeah, a lot of the oral Torah is written down, but they are discussions, they are disagreements. But oral means it's ongoing. The written Torah are the 5 books, or the Tanakh, 5 books plus, okay? But when we talk about our law, we practice oral Torah. We practice something that's called Rabbinic Judaism. And one of my favorites, I have a lot of favorites. I'm very fickle with my favorites. But my favorite this month, Rabbi Jacob, I taught on Shabbat somewhere, and I quoted him on a different topic. His name is Rabbi Nathaniel Lopez Cardoso. He's in Jerusalem. He's a rebel Orthodox rabbi. I love rebel Orthodox rabbis. But he says there's great value in doubt in halacha, because it makes us straddle these things and work them through and not be doubt, we can move forward. And his particular diatribe this week was about the importance of being exposed to more than the yeshiva education. And I'm sure he has an agenda, and I'm not going to go there with you now. But he took that topic based on the Parsha for last week with Moses's upbringing, that he was in two worlds. He was nurtured for some number of years by his real mother, but he was raised in the palace of the Pharaoh as well. Having exposure to different things made him be who he was. So maybe that seems like a real stretch to you, but that's a typical example of something that maybe isn't your hot topic, maybe isn't my hot topic, but a way that you look at something with new eyes and new thoughts, and with the blessing of not having a definitive interpretation always there for you to look at without your ability to question. What this also leads to, and I hear this from many people who I've had the pleasure of knowing who are Jews by choice, is they chose Judaism, or they came to love Judaism because it's intellectually honest, because you can grapple with these things. You don't have to buy the one-line belief. It's just different. So not being literal, as opposed to a literal dogma, is a big part of Judaism. We don't quote chapter and verse. What we do say is well, Rabbi so-and-so said, and it could be a current type rabbi. There's a lot of quoting of Rabbi Sachs right now since his passing. But that's what we say. We don't quote chapter and verse. So it's just a very different kind of thing. And again, that word that the literal translation, the literal meaning of something, which is where we were in third grade Hebrew school, is called the Peshat. But that is the beginning, not the end. Okay, anybody have any disputations, arguments, questions, doubts? Help me, talk to me. I'm just taking a second to see who's on this. Excuse me for a sec. There, you're bigger, much better. Okay, wonderful. Nothing. Okay, I think I see Rochelle and Perlina. Okay, Perlina?
Right. So just a thought as you were talking, I think that it's very important what we do every single day on this earth, which will, as far as I know, help us in Olam Haba, in the world to come.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important each day that we live here on this earth, to do mitzvahs and to try to be acceptable for Olam Haba. Just a statement.
And I didn't mean to say that Olam Haba is not a part of this equation. It absolutely is, for many interpretations. Totally proper, kosher, and yes. But what I was trying to say, and perhaps not doing it as well, is that it is not the focus. We're not doing this because it's going to get us to the world to come in a better place. We're doing this because this is why we are on earth and why we were created, to not be indifferent to the plight of others. Is that consistent with are you comfortable with that?
I'm very comfortable.
Okay,
with it.
thank you.
I just wanted to expand
yes,
on
thank you for, yes, because I see how it could have been. I did not mean to. I could have been misinterpreted a bit. Rochelle, what do you want to say?
Well, I wanted to say, because I have so much faith, and when I learn something that I read from the Torah, and I have been taking it I just do it. I didn't ever ask why and what. Lately, I've been asking questions for different things. For example, like putting one shoe, your left foot shoe first or your right foot first, whatever. But now so I looked a little bit into it, a little further than just what's written, and so that I could understand it more.
Okay, that is actually oral law, and it's not written. It is a tradition, and there's no law about that.
Okay.
I'm sure you understand that.
Yeah.
I've forgotten what you're supposed to put on the right shoe first. I forgot what that is. I mean, I know it exists, but I don't remember.
I can't remember.
It gives you a better day or something?
Yeah.
Good luck?
To start out with your right foot on the right side, it's supposed to be a better thing to do for mankind.
You know, there are
But
things, yeah, there are things that are
But that-
much more prevalent in some communities coming from your background than in others. People are saying to me and think that that I understand this poo poo poo. I never heard this poo 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 until I started teaching this class. So I'm learning, but I do want to make the distinction between community practices and traditions and law. And law is law, it's real, but it also has variations. In one community, between eating meat and milk, there are absolutely communities that have a 3-hour rule. You probably don't know about them because you're not as, they're Sephardic or Mizrahi. There's a 1-hour rule in Holland. There's a 3-hour, 3 hours common, 6-hour rule in some communities, but those are community rules. And they're not wrong. None of them is wrong and none of them is the better one. But what your community practices seems to be what we're not only comfortable with, but we come to believe that this is the only way and start criticizing others. And that's actually not, that's not Jewish. If I can go to the traditional side, the idea of hair coverings, that can you wear a wig or do you have to cover your hair with a snoot or these are community, this is not law. This is community practice, what is right. And the thing that you brought up, I think people are passionate about these community comfort things and they make them identify and they kind of concretely put in to our lives a reminder of what it signifies in a bigger way. So it's all good. But I do want to tell you that a lot of these things that we sometimes think are law are not. There's this thing about, there was a community in somewhere in Eastern Europe, of course, it's always in Eastern Europe when you talk about some sort of legend, vague legend, about that on Simchat Torah you had to, when you march around with the Sifrei Torah, the books of the scrolls around the whole synagogue, and then you go back, often it's a bima that's raised, and that you had to, when you got to the bima, when you're going back up, you had to bend down on your knees almost so that your tush was on the floor. That was the law. And it was done for years, and somebody finally investigated why they had done this, because 60 or 80 years before, there was a very low-hanging candle chandelier, and if you didn't bend down, your hair would catch on fire. You know, but people were vehement that this is how you do it, and if you're visiting us, this is how you're going to do it. So that might be an extreme, but it's true. You can't make this stuff up, guys, okay? So there's a lot of traditions like that. Miss Snyder, hello, Jackie, yes.
Hello. Okay, so what I want to say is that it took me a long time to begin my second part of my Jewish learning, and it's because I didn't come from a household where there was any Jewish learning or really much practice. And I was recently at my cousin's grandson's bar mitzvah, and I had a chance to see their family and realize we descend from a common ancestor, but that dissension in one line continued the teachings, the observance, the traditions, the value of the Jewish education, and it has paid off. In my case, I had to discover it myself, and I thought that I was doing a great job with my girls. I have 2 daughters, and they had bat mitzvahs, and I provided that education. They went to a Jewish day school, but then they went to public school, and I really didn't continue. And the attitudes of my children and even my stepchildren are, we don't need formal religion as long as we teach our children to be honest, respectful, not to,
I'm gonna cut you off just because it's a little bit long and I'm
okay,
kind of teary.
I'm sorry. So I really think we have to do a better job of continuing with our children, our grandchildren, of providing this access. Because once they're away, it's hard to come back.
I'm gonna, oh, you know why I'm emotional. Thank you, Jackie. Jackie's my cousin. Stop beating yourselves up. Each of us comes from our history, from our parents. I certainly think that you, from this day forward, or from whatever, even by virtue of voting with your computers at this moment being with us, understand that there's a beauty in Judaism that needs to be explored. But having said that, what you got or what you gave, you were doing from your exposure in your community what you believed was right. American Jewry, excuse me, the Jewish institutions of the last 100 years have screwed up badly, in Cheryl's opinion, because they basically did make bar mitzvah the terminal, uh, whatever the degree, I don't know what you would call it, and also the need to assimilate and all those kinds of things. And our parents could not give us what they didn't have themselves, and they didn't get it. And in other words, it's complex. The other thing that we have to understand is that if you are not living an active Jewish life and exposed constantly to Jewish things, and I'm not saying necessarily an Orthodox life, I really mean that in the bottom of my heart. I do not have a label on the kind of Judaism I practice, but it is a very Jewish life. I'm talking out of school, but I was just thinking about this because I was looking at Silver Linings, Cleveland Jewish News, and I interview all the time with the same questions. I was interviewed about 4 years ago, and they said, what is something that is Jewish in your life? Something, that's one of their core questions. And I thought, it's a harder question to say, what is something that is not Jewish in my life? Because it doesn't matter what I do, it's from that kind of context. So that's how I was raised, and that's how raised our children as well. So but if you weren't that way, raised that way, then you can't give what you didn't get. So, but moving forward, we have a counterculture where it's not only Jews of the next generations are not interested. It's pretty much an age thing, of a generational kinds of thing. I can't solve it right now. I would recommend to anyone who's willing to look at the Sarah Horowitz book, because she came exactly from that, being an atheist and an anti, and spending a lot of time in an ashram learning about searching for something that was, to use the title of her book, here all along. So that book is an excellent book for people who are willing to maybe take a chance at another viewpoint of that generation. That's one thing I can tell you that I concretely believe. Enough of my voice for now. I'm going to share with you, we talked about different interpretations of things and not acknowledging the simple child's one sentence view. Things evolve, and there are different communities with different viewpoints on things, but a traditional one that is beautiful, which has an intellectual interpretation of it given by Rabbi Ari Lamb, I'd like to share with you. I have to tell you just context, and some of you may know this podcast, the tradition in Judaism is to study the Talmud 1 page a day from beginning to end, and it takes about 7.5 years to do that. It's called Daf Yomi. Those of us who know Hebrew know that Yom, it means day, Daf is page, so it's a page a day. So there are many podcasts. Next month, I'm probably going to introduce you to Miriam, who does Daf on TikTok. Wears too much eyeliner, but other than that, she's great. But today, I'm going to introduce you to, if you don't know already, to Take One, which is a tablet magazine thing. The host is Liel Leibowitz, and I'm not. They're all 10 minutes. We're going to do about 4 minutes of this one, just because I wanted someone to give an interpretation that is beyond the one line of how to sort of show you the mechanism about how things are interpreted in Judaism. So I'm going to begin it. Let me see, share screen. And where did it go? I just set it up. I hate when this happens. Hello. This is not the screen we're supposed to be sharing. There we are. No, not that one either. There we go. Mazel tov. Okay, I think Liel is going to introduce him, but this is a particular page of Talmud that he is interpreting, and this is a process I'd like to share, and the messaging is great.
Friends, my favorite teachers, I think one of our smartest public intellectuals, to come join me and explain this wonderful passage. He's the head of Bnei Zion and the host of a brand new, amazing podcast called Good Faith Effort. Welcome, Rabbi Dr. Ari Lamb.
My friend, it is amazing to be here with you.
So explain to me this great vision of the world that Rav Yosef is seeing. We're accustomed sometimes to, sentences like, oh, the meek shall inherit the earth, etc. But the most interesting thing to me here is that the one constant, almost like the axis around which this world revolves, is the fact that people who devote their life to study and to mitzvot and to practice, they remain exactly where they are. Make sense of this for us.
Okay, he's saying that he's talking about in the world to come. This particular daf says essentially that in heaven, the great are less important, and the meek, or the less people who are not deemed great, are the more important, the more valued. But Torah scholars or students, meaning you and me, are always valued in both places. That's what this daf is about.
This is one of my favorite passages in the entire Talmud, and in the immortal words of one of the great moral philosophers of our time, Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, if I'm not going to be eternally rewarded for my behavior, I'd sure like to know now. Look, the world to come, or the afterlife, is one of those things that on the one hand is totally irrelevant to everyday life because we don't actually get to experience it until we die. So you might suppose that we shouldn't bother thinking about it at all, which is basically the sense that you'd get from like the conventional wisdom in the media or pop culture that always says, oh, Jews don't believe in the afterlife. But actually, as this passage from the Talmud reminds us, Jews have actually thought a lot about the afterlife and reward and punishment after death. Now, why is that? I mean, it's definitely true that much more than any other major faith, Judaism is, relentlessly focused on living life well in this world. So why spend time focusing on the afterlife, even if we believe in it? And I think the answer is because it's actually a really great way to help us think about what really matters in our world. So when we think about what things will be like in the afterlife, who will be punished, who will be rewarded, that's another way of saying, hey, here's how we wish things could be in this world if it weren't so imperfect, right? The afterlife is our way of imagining the world not as it is, but as it ought to be. Now, the coward's way out is to wait to enjoy that better world until after you die. But what Judaism demands of us is that we shouldn't be content to wait for the afterlife to get to heaven, right? We should actually try to build heaven here on earth. Now, how do we do that? Well, the Talmud gives us the answer right here, as it tells us there's one thing that we believe is just as valuable in this world as it will be and as it is in the afterlife, and that is the Torah, the wisdom of Jewish tradition, of which each and every Jew is a steward. So, if we want to build heaven here on earth, the way we do that is by bringing out our tradition into the world around us. And, believe me, Jewish tradition from the Bible to the Talmud and beyond that even has something profound to say about quite literally every human endeavor, from personal questions like how to be a good friend, how to create a good marriage, to societal questions like how should we organize our politics? How should we educate the next generation? And for too long, so many Jews have assumed that the Torah, that Jewish tradition writ large, I suppose, is something that only Jews can appreciate. And even when we appreciate it, we do that by studying it in like a hermetically sealed room such that when you're done studying, you leave it in that room while you go on about your day. But the reality is that, first of all, Jewish tradition is not some mysterious form of knowledge unrelated to anything else. It's actually like the key to a much richer appreciation of everything around you, from relationships to government to pop culture to psychology. And second of all, guess what? Vast numbers of people across this country and across the world are hungry for the wisdom that you have. I'll just give you a statistic. Nearly 7 out of 10 Americans, for example, think the Bible is a source of positive values and inspiration for American society. It's one of the few instances of truly bipartisan agreement left in this country. And Americans overwhelmingly want to know more about what the Bible thinks, what our tradition thinks. And as the people who actually brought the Bible to the world, and whose sages have thought more and more deeply about it than anyone else in history, we therefore actually have wisdom that Americans rightly consider essential to our civic future. So my recommendation is let's do what we Jews have always done best. Let's study our traditions, and then let's go out there and share some of our hard-earned wisdom with our fellow Americans.
For those of you who want to know, Ari Lamb, he's a grandson of Norman, I believe, Lamb. Questions, comments? Don't have to, but this is a Rabbi tackling today a page of Talmud that was written about the year 200, the Common Era, and putting it in today's context. Okay, well, I saved an easy topic for almost last, God. Okay. There is one, when I started with this topic, and it's evolved a lot about big ideas in Judaism, it came about because a parent of a high school kid in El Paso, Texas said, my kid came to dinner table and said that, and it was a public school student, said that his friends wanted to know what Jews believe. And he said, we believe in one God. That was it. He was done with his conversation. He didn't know. And he's not alone. And a lot of what we're talking about today maybe would have helped him give more of some answers. But the one God concept certainly is foundational and fundamental to Judaism. And traditionally, the God is paternal, our Father, our King, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, omniscient, meaning all-knowing, omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, omnipresent, meaning being everywhere at the same place. But we know from living that this is not the case. It's not a one-liner. What does being one God mean? Maybe we are all God. Maybe everything is God. Maybe our existence is God. For us, in terms of what we do know, is that even in Torah, God and we have had an evolving relationship, because in the Bible, God is very hands-on, okay? But with time, including in the later chapters, and then definitely in more recent times, like a mere, 2,500 years ago, God has retracted, and man has become, or women has become empowered as an agent of God and to be a critical part of the equation, of which we've already spoken some. Still, Jews believe that God is real. God is a thing, but it's not the same God, and it's not the guy in the sky God. And I gave a class about a year and a half ago about it's fine to question, and not only is it fine to figure out, it's a lifetime thing to figure out what God means to you. And what that means is that you're being a true child of Israel. Yisrael means to struggle, literally. Yisra is to struggle, El is the word for God. To struggle with what that means. And if it's the power of good, and if that's what works for you, then that is God. What God is not is a guy in the sky taking notes and controlling, and people who have the most fundamental belief of that is God, all powerful and all deciding. It is then you ask them, well, what about the Holocaust in terms of doling out punishment? And that argument weakens for them too, because that kind of breaks the mold in terms of justifying that particular belief. So it's really complicated. But being agnostic is actually, meaning in the sense of being unsure of what or who God is legitimate in Judaism, and it's self-motoring and empowering to work it through. And having, by the same token, the converse, which is a devout faith in God and in Hashem, is absolutely foundational to our people and Judaism as well. This is what I'm saying about not being a literal, dogmatic, one-liner kind of thing. But when we take the idea of guilt and put it in the equation, meaning you either believe all or nothing, that's not the Jewish message, that's not the Jewish way. The non-believer is not obligated to somebody who closes the door and says, I'm an atheist, that's not the Jewish way. Being an agnostic and a struggler is the Jewish way. But not doing the struggle, just closing the door, is really what is not, that's not Jewish. That we are not supposed to do that. We've never abandoned reason in our heads. We've never abandoned the struggle. When we pray, the word for prayer is reflexive. Does God need our prayers, or do we need the prayers? It is the word that's now is praying with intentionality, and it really is a profound concept, meaning it makes us aware of what's around us. Do we need to thank God for that glass of wine or that piece of bread, or do we need to think about all of the labor and all of the planning and all of the beauty and all of the nature that went into getting that piece of bread to our lips? Everybody from the guy who's loaded, even the guy we have to include who put the stuff in your bag at the grocery store. All of these things. So when we think about that bread and thanking, it's all of that in terms of intentionality and in terms of awareness. So the idea of praying to God is real, and asking and petitioning, and most of all, thanking, is part of what enriches us and connects us to something larger than ourselves and to God. And beyond that, I leave it to you to fill in the gaps, because this is a hard subject. There are considered in Torah to be 70 faces of God. So surely for each one of us, there's one that works for us, or maybe more. You don't hear that. And you're going to hear some people who are kind of, let's say, full of themselves, for lack of a better, something worse, who are going to say that my God is the right God. That's, again, not the Jewish way. It's complicated, super complicated. So I said I left the super easy topic, and I hope I did it justice. It's tough. Mitzvot, I want to talk about briefly. The idea of mitzvot was that we've entered into a covenant. We made a deal. We made a partnership. A covenant is another word for a contract with God, and that contract we entered into as a people. The Christians have said, Christian guy whose name originally was Saul, who wasn't Christian, who became Paul, he developed a new covenant and said that the old covenant was no longer valid. We do not have a new covenant. We do not have a New Testament. We only have one testament. We only have one covenant. God revealed instructions. It's kind of the Torah, a how-to manual. And the literal root of the word Torah is teaching. Again, that word is study, schools, learn. That's the Jewish thing. It means teaching, the word Torah. Part of the covenant also is having a land, the land of Israel. I'm going to defer now for a sec to something I'd like to read you from Sarah Horowitz in this particular topic of the commandments. We are commanded as a result of our covenant with God. So what are we supposed to do? The traditional Jewish answer to that question is that we should perform what are known as the mitzvot, which mean commandments, and is the plural form of the word mitzvah, which is sometimes used to mean good deed. Remember the laws from the Torah that the rabbis were debating and interpreting in the Talmud? Those laws are the mitzvot. The mitzvot include well-known laws, such as the Ten Commandments, as well as more obscure ones, such as the prohibition on contacting the spirits of the dead. Some of the mitzvot are positive, the do's, like do celebrate various holidays. Some are negative, the don'ts, like don't commit incest. Some are more about ethics, love strangers, help the poor, while others are more ritualistic. Don't eat certain animals, don't work on Shabbat. Some are between people, don't gossip, do return lost property to its owners. Some are between people and God, don't worship other gods. Some have obvious reasons, don't commit murder, while others don't. Don't wear clothes made of linen and wool mixed together. In addition to these Torah mitzvot, The rabbis have added some of their own ideas, which we refer to as the rabbinic mitzvot, rabbinic commandments, including lighting a Chanukiah, a menorah on Hanukkah. Taken together, the mitzvot form what is known as halacha, meaning the way or the path. Those of us who know a little Hebrew know halech means to go or to walk. This is how you go. This is how you walk. This is your path. Halacha is the overall body of Jewish law, or as Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson describes it, the systemic effort of the rabbis to translate Torah into action. Mitzvot is a systemic effort of the rabbis to translate Torah into action. And for those folks who want to focus only in the social part, just the man-to-man, that is your call, but I have to tell you, is focusing on the man to God as well, at some level, really concretizes, makes real the mitzvot, adds beauty to our lives, adds opportunity for community. Would somebody please, someone has to mute? I will mute. See, maybe that's okay. Maybe that'll work that through. Those, I'm suggesting that rituals are not scary. Rituals are beautiful. They add beauty. They give opportunity to be a part of a community, or to invite people over and have good food, or to have a routine that is positive that you come to look forward to. This leads me, it's a brilliant bridge to my next concept beyond the commandments, which is certainly attached to the commandments, is the commandment as it is said in Torah, in Shemot, in Exodus, when we receive the tablets, is the children of Israel say, Na'aseh v'nishma. Okay, this is so different from what we're used to do. What the heck did I say? Okay, Na'aseh v'nishma means we'll do it, and then we'll understand it. I can't tell you how many, and so what the children of Israel said, okay, we'll do it. And then with time, it'll make sense to us. This is so counterindicative to many of my students who say, I need to understand this before I start, and I need to know the prayer purposely, whatever, before I start lighting 2 Shabbat candles. I need to know the whys, I need to study the history, I need to learn the prayer purpose. And I'm just saying, kind of like that old, was it Nike, or I don't remember what, just do it kind of thing, because that's what it says in Torah. So Nike stole that particular ad slogan from Torah, from the book of Exodus. You didn't know that, you heard it here first. Okay, but we have to consider that just doing something, then it starts to make sense. So this is actually Torah, which is, I'm not saying to do everything, but you don't have to know something purposely in your head before you do it or understand it. That's not the Jewish way of doing things. So in terms of the mitzvot, if there's something that is a curiosity to you, you might want to try it before you have done a thorough dissection in the form of study. Another thing I want to share with you, please, and I know we're running late, we're almost there, folks, is that you can't practice Judaism only in your head. Judaism is communal. The simplest example right now is that where many things require a quorum of minyan, okay? If to say that if you're in mourning, you are required to be in community when you say the Kaddish. It is, community matters. It is not a singular religion. It's not an intellectual religion. It's a difficult religion. It's an impossible religion to do without others. People who are intellectually students of Judaism are students of Judaism, but they're not Jews in terms of practicing by the quote unquote rule book, because community matters in Judaism. There's different ways to define it, but identifying with the group, it's not a solo sport, an individual sport. I wanted to point that out. That there's this little thing that I kind of like, which is Judaism is believe, behave, and belong. And the belong thing is part of, very big part, and adds beauty to our lives. I'm going to move forward. I have one more thing, and then I'm going to allow some questions, and then I'm going to close with another Talmud lesson. Comments? Rochelle, is that you? No? Okay. Anybody? Come on, this is a lot of heavy stuff, and I feel like I kind of really rushed through it, and I don't know if did I do okay? Did I make any sense? You got some takeaways? Or are you thoroughly confused? Thoroughly confused? Karen, you want to say something, or
Yeah, no, I do. I have a question. It's not confusing. I think you did it very clearly and very well. Well
thank you.
done. But my question, you're presenting a view. Do Orthodox, and I'm talking about really, true Orthodox,
True.
do they also, whatever that is, more, okay.
I
But
don't
do they also believe that the interpretation of God or the Olam Haba, the world to come, do they all believe that there is a world to go into? I mean, no, you don't have the answer, but I'm just trying to figure that out.
Okay, first of all, the rabbi that I quoted is Orthodox, unquestionably Orthodox. The one that you heard, Ari Lem. Okay, okay. The second thing is the agreement among Jews is that there is something of the spirit, the soul that is eternal. Now, I'm not saying that every individual does, but in terms of, regardless of label, that is an agreement. There's also an agreement that we don't really know.
Mhm.
What you've got, and this is, forgive me, because there is fact and experience that comes into what we believe is spiritual. Different communities were often affected by the philosophy or the ideology of a particular rabbinic leader, or, believe it or not, of the community around them who might be Christian. If the thought was very much on a particular thing and everybody felt that way, absolutely Jews signed on in that particular community. I'm not saying to the details, but to starting thinking of that as a possibility. So I can tell you that, for example, the idea of accepting God and praying to God is in every prayer book, except for, it's actually changing in what do I want to call it? Forgive me. Help me with the fourth Reconstructionists now. There used to be a joke saying three groups pray to Baruch Atah Adonai, and one group prays to Baruch Atah I don't know. Okay, but that's still, like I explained before, extremely Jewish. I guess one of the things that nobody who is in doubting of God in an Orthodox synagogue would be denied being called up to the Torah or any other kind of, there's not that kind of thing. And I can tell you that I've laughed at the word real Orthodox because that's a real, if you read about Orthodoxy now, it's never been more divided than ever than now.
Yeah.
And so the word has become, people are using their little slits of traditional or Rabbi so-and-so's thing or whatever. It's complicated, but I don't know how to answer your question. I don't think I said anything that's offensive to most. I don't think there's anything that I said that's untrue. Possibly I said from a liberal point of view things that are uncomfortable for people on the other end. I don't know. Maybe I'm an equal opportunity offender. It's tough, but I don't. Some of my best friends are Orthodox. We'll put it that way. Okay. Okay. Some of us are smiling. None of them are offended. And with some of them, as in my brother, we talk about this constantly. And he's a 3-year yeshiva bacher in Israel. I mean, he's certainly not that anymore. But I think that you'd be surprised. I think that there are people who are, what's the word I want, insular communities who are absolutely protected from and are not allowed to use media. Or I think, but that is fringe groups, forgive me. That's not, that's not who I'm talking about, because you're always going to find the exceptions, and you're going to find on the far left, you're going to find extremely strange things as well, I assume. But I think my answer is we're okay throughout what I would call most Jewish traditions with what I said. I hope so.
Thank you. Yeah.
Marcy, tell me you're coming from. Talk to me. She has stuff directly from Jerusalem. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm just thinking of my journey, which has you and Michelle a part of it through these past 40 years. And I remember thinking, Orthodox, once you get to Orthodox, you don't have to worry about making decisions. It's all there. Having reached that Orthodoxy, it's still decisions. It's decisions of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it within a realm. And I think one of the things that I was thrilled to hear you focus on is the idea that this is community. We are there to be a community. We are there to help others. That is, we are there to be different. The whole idea of the Tower of Babel, from my perception, was we need to be different. Hashem wants us to be different so that we have what to bring to this world and how to help others. And so I think all of us here and what we're doing in terms of learning, make sure you tell your family, I had a class today. Let your children and grandchildren know, I had a class today, that you're continuing that education. And so with the possibility that they will as well, because this is, you never know it all.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I appreciate that. I'll allow one more, and then I want to close with like I said, a Talmud class. Okay. I'm going to screen share. Just let me get it out first. It's Rabbi Lamb. Goodbye. You can go away. Too many things on my screen. We're getting there. Maybe we're getting there.
I actually like Christmas.
Okay,
I love
quiet. Don't give away the punchline. Okay. We looked at the Daf Yomi day of Talmud day in terms of somebody's interpretation. I don't know. For some of you, I'm sure you've heard this. This is Ilan Gold, who's a well-known Jewish comedian. I actually heard it many times, always enjoy it, and I hope those of you for whom it's a repeat will also smile. But there's also a thing in here about how picky some communities are, how attuned to details Jews in general are about stuff. And this is a what if. What if there was a daf, a page in Talmud about having a Christmas tree? Okay? And he does this about a Christmas tree, which might be or is a fantasy for people who would entertain a Christmas tree, who would understand this. They probably wouldn't entertain a Christmas tree. But having said that, the process is actually, we identify with on many other topics, like perhaps, let's say, IVF, because I mentioned that before, in vitro, or space ritual, Jewish rituals in space. So did I hit share screen, or did I just talk and not hit share screen? I didn't hit it. Okay, we're going to share the screen and do about 2 minutes with Talmud on Christmas trees.
music, the lights, the deck. I love going to my house. He has a beautiful Christmas tree, but I do not have Christmas tree envy. I don't. Who wants to
I don't have a clue what just happened. Forgive me. We're going to start again.
a tree from the woods or even a store and like tie it to the roof of your car and bring it into the house with the schmutz? I don't need that. I don't care how beautiful a tree looks. But here's the main reason why I'm so happy that Christmas trees aren't part of our traditions and our holidays. If it were, there would be 1,000 rules and regulations regarding the tree. There would be a tractate of Talmud, Masechet Ha'etz. And it would just be chapters and chapters of rabbis arguing about how you shecht the tree, where to shecht it, when to shecht it, if it has a blemish, can you even shecht it at all? What kind of tree must it be? Well, it cannot bear fruit because that would be destroying future food, but it must emit sap. You have to see a droplet of sap, a kazayit of sap, because to show it's a living tree, you can't cut down a tree that's already dead. You got to kill it yourself in the most humane way possible. Can a goy cut down the tree for you? Is it mavushal, non-mavushal? Big machloket, big disagreement. When you're bringing the tree, thank you, the door. When you're bringing the tree into the house, do you make the bracha before you enter the doorway? Hillel says once your left foot is inside the foyer, it's too late. Shammai says no, as long as both feet aren't in the house. And they both agree it may be too late to make the bracha on entering, but it's never too late to make the bracha on mounting. When you mount the tree, and when you're standing the tree up, you should have in mind all the fallen trees that were killed to make paper and furniture. And when decorating the tree, and this is crucial, you must string the lights right to left, but light them left to right. And if, God forbid, if one of the bulbs is out, the whole string's no good. Each bulb represents Klal Yisrael. And if one of our lights are out, we're all out. Some say as long as it's dim, if the light bulb is dim, if you read the Rashi, he says the word dim includes a flicker. If it's a flickering, then there's still some life in the light. It's a flicker. And once the tree is lit, you cannot derive any benefit from the light of the tree. If you want to read, you have to put a lamp next to it. If the lamp goes out, throw the book away, run out of the room. Don't derive any benefit from the smell either. Be with your nose closed and breathe through your mouth. And chas v'sholom, should a stem break off, the whole tree is garbage. But you can't just throw it out. You got to chop it down, save it for next year's chach on Sukkot. Thank you so much. Stand with us. I got to go.
It's not an exaggeration, guys. That's pretty much how it goes. So now you've had a Talmud discussion on the Olam Haba, the world to come, and one on Christmas, killing of Christmas trees. Okay. Any final words?
Thank you.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day, a wondrul month. I'll see you on Valentine's Day, and we're going to do a Dvar Torah on Valentine's Day. Thank you all for being with me.
Yasher Koach.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yasher koach.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, you have us all smiling. Thank you so much.
Miracle.